Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Physical Therapy Private Practice Secrets of the Top 10%. My name is Brian Gallagher. I'm your host. And this week, we're going to dive right in because I have a special guest with me today. I've got Garrett, the founder of NeuFit and the Neubie E-Stim, which you hear me talk a lot about. And obviously, for those of you who've been tracking, if whether this is your first time or 300th time listening to my podcast or checking us out on YouTube, or listening to any of our public talks at PPS, Ascend, CSM, wherever we are, state conventions, you've heard me talk about this Neubie over and over and over again, because I can tell you, I think we are at a statistical point of about 98% of all people who buy one machine end up buying more than one. And nobody would do that if it wasn't effective. And I know what it's like for a lot of you guys that are listening. You hear E-Stim and you think this passive machine, you throw pads on people and you walk away and you get 13, 14 bucks for it. That's not what we're talking about here. This is a much more advanced piece of electrical equipment with much greater benefits and effects. And with that said, that is exactly where we're going to go with this week's podcast. So if you guys are saying, hey, I've heard Garrett before, I heard Brian talk about, the Neubie and where it came from and how it was founded. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. You heard the early beginnings. You've heard the reasoning behind why Garrett did the research and did the studies, got the patents, did the science behind creating and developing this piece of advanced technology that we are now using in clinics all across the country. You've heard that, but what you haven't heard is the fact that the Neubie and Garrett and his involvement in this has been out there now for 6 years. And I feel that you are all entitled to get the update information on the effects and benefits that the Neubie has had, both on your practice from a practice management perspective, but also for your clinical outcomes, for your patients, for your community, for society at large. If we aren't advancing medicine in the allied health professions and we're just leaving it up to the surgeons and medical doctors and pharmaceutical companies, God help us, right? Because every doctor on planet Earth is only going to do three things. They're going to give you a test, they're going to give you drugs, or they're going to cut you open. Outside of that, it's all up to us, brother. It's all up to us. It's up to us to apply what we know with our hands-on manual skills, our knowledge, our physiology, our understanding of physiology and neurophysiology. And we have to use advanced technology if we're planning to have advanced benefits. And we now, the news is in, the reports are in, the data is now on the press, the journals are going out, and I need you to hear from Garrett what exactly I'm talking about there. So hopefully you stay riveted to the rest of this podcast, hear these details so you can better educate your staff, your patients, and your medical community, because you can have a greater impact on your patients as well as balancing your practice, which I'm going to share with you a little bit more about that. So Garrett, why don't we do a brief introduction? Somebody, this may be their first time listening to our podcast, and they need to hear a little bit about you and what got you down this path, just briefly. And then let's pick it up, 6 years later. Where are we in 2023 going into 2024? And why is this at the lead position, the pole position? Why is it that this is at the front of the pack of what people are looking for in terms of putting advanced clinical technology in their practice?
Absolutely. Happy to share all that. And thanks for having me back on the podcast here, Brian.
Absolutely.
My journey in this, it's sort of, I'm grateful to have found a way where my interests and my academic background in engineering and neuroscience can all kind of intersect. I also was an athlete. I still consider myself an athlete. I think we're all athletes, but
yeah.
I played ice hockey in college. I had an injury where I had some torn ligaments. I was supposed to have surgery. And based on my experiences with traditional physical therapy, traditional orthopedic medicine, I didn't really think there were many alternative options, different things that could help me. So I kind of resigned myself to surgery. And then just through these wonderful set of circumstances, a friend of a friend introduced me to a doctor who was doing functional neurology and using older versions of direct current. So it was analog devices, more like microcurrent at the time, but looking at the neurological response to injury and using these more primitive versions of direct current, I was able to heal my ligaments. I was back on the ice in 3 weeks. I avoided surgery. And so I was happy as an athlete, but as a physics major, as a pre-engineering student, to find something that made sense scientifically from first principles like that, that's what really got me excited. And so going through that experience, I felt called to share this type of work with as many people as I could. And then after that, I went on a 8 or 9 year journey of learning about and using and working with clinicians, to implement whatever technology was out there in the electrical world, and understanding the differences between direct and alternating current, understanding the limitations in what was out there at the time, over time, seeing all of these opportunities to advance the technology and the methodology. I got excited enough that I went back for additional graduate school in neuroscience along the way. And then I finally, just through a whole series of circumstances, finally decided what I wanted to do when I grew up, and decided to launch the Neubie. And that was, a 2-year journey. And then we got to the point where 6 years ago, we released our first units, had our first certification course. And it's been, a really, really cool journey since then. I kind of liken it to climbing up Mount Everest, where it's a long trek. We're part of the way up the mountain right now. So, we can look back and appreciate the view, and appreciate that we've made progress getting up there. But it's also very humbling to look up and see there's still so much more work left to be done, and so much more left to do there. So I think we're kind of at that stage. And then in terms of the updates, like you talked about, there is in journals, a lot of progress. We have a full-time PhD neuroscientist who runs our research program, and several research partners. We just, in the last couple of months of the time of this recording, have had a case series published, and I'm happy to share the link, of course, a case series published on functional recovery in MS patients. So this is looking at.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're moving into the case studies and the research, and I definitely want to hone in on that. And I think everybody wants to hear about that data. And it's surprising to have a company that's 6 years out, like, and you have a research division, you have a publishing division that's really working to make sure that people are getting the news. I wanted to just pause right here, though, before we get into that. And the reason why I want to take up this point. For those of you who are listening, I like to think we're like-minded. I'm a physical therapist. You're all physical therapists. I own private practice for, 23 years. You guys probably own private practices, or you want to own a private practice. You're concerned about the health and well-being of your patients and the people in your community. So am I. And when I hear Garrett's story, I want to point out the parallels. As a physical therapist, our primary concern is others. Our measuring stick of our self-worth or our professional value hinges on the percent of improvement we're providing person to person, one person at a time, and then 10 people, 100 people, thousands of people, annual number of visits, right? And when I hear Garrett's story, it aligns so much with the professional values, the personal and professional integrity of a physical therapist in private practice, of a physical therapy private practice owner. Because as you heard him say, he got into it with the intention of providing a better outcome to injured status, to injuries that he personally suffered and that he knew others suffered. It wasn't like, I'm this private equity guy, this person pitched me this thing, I had this neuroscience background, I'm going to apply my understanding of neurophysics and science. I think I could add value, and we're going to do a 10x, a 15x EBITDA return, and we're going to go for a 15-year flip. There's so much of that crap out there. There's so much of these people just running businesses for the sake of just profit mongering, which I'm not against profit, but the purpose, the alignment, the essence of so many of those other things, those private equity groups, the corporate, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we all have to be an LLC. We all have to incorporate. I'm not down on that, but for with what intention, with what alignment. And so when I hear Garrett's story, it's like the same reason why I went into physical therapy myself. I was playing soccer, went to Europe, came back, 3 of our top 4 players were on crutches all at one time in the season. I'm like, this can't be, like, who's treating these people? And that's got me really excited about going into healthcare and trying to provide a different effect. I always feel like, even to this day, Meg is in the business of helping other businesses succeed. The more we can help you succeed, the more success we will have in return. And I feel like Garrett has formulated that same thing. So that brings us to this next part of the discussion. If I'm right, then you should have proof in the pudding. You should have results to talk about. You should have objective data that shares, and that is a setting an example for all of us, that this isn't just rhetoric. This isn't just, anecdotal. Everybody likes the way it feels, but I actually have data that shows and suggests that this has a overwhelmingly positive effect and influence on particular conditions. And so you were leading into one condition that's close to my heart, which is MS. We all in physical know somebody or met somebody or know of somebody who suffers from MS, and it's just not something you're going to shake. So what can we do to help improve the quality of that person's life is dear to all of us in the clinical world. So Garrett, you were talking about, you actually did a study specifically to the MS population?
Yeah, absolutely. And before that, if I can just pick up on one theme there, when you talk a little bit about my story, I think it is so just such a strong parallel to you and other practice owners listening on here. Like, I as you said, I got into this because I was passionate about the work and the impact it could have on other people, and have had to learn along the way business. And so, the training that you're providing to physical therapists who own their practices to become business owners, to become CEOs, I can really relate to that. And that's been a journey. It's sort of an identity transformation. Each step along the way, we have to be kind of flexible in our identity and who we are, and what, of course, that means that involves what we do on a daily basis, right? Our activities.
I like that. I'm writing that down. Identity transformation. That's perfect. It says it all.
It's such a theme, and I know you. I mean, it certainly comes through in your teachings with, when you're talking to other practice owners and stuff too. But I think that's an important theme. So I just wanted to touch on that before going by. But
I appreciate it.
In terms of the MS population, yeah. So we've done a lot of work with Dr. Terry Walls, who WAHLS. She is a medical doctor, author of the Walls Protocol. She herself has MS, and what in the early 2000s was disabled, was in a wheelchair, and went through this process of applying what ended up becoming the Walls Protocol. So it's a version of a paleo plus diet and other lifestyle interventions that she used to stop the progression of her disease. And then she, we didn't have the Neubie yet. She was using older versions of electrical stimulation. So she would have electrodes on her body 10 to 12 hours a day. So there's 2 main stages to the process. One is, the Walls Protocol network to stop the progression of the disease. There's this autoimmune state where the immune system is in overdrive, right? Hyperactive, causing damage, and stopping the progression, quelling that autoimmune activity is step 1. And then from there, okay, that's great. We're preventing things, sealing off against further damage, but what can we do to improve function or regain some of that function that was lost? And so for her, she was using, more antiquated forms of electricity and had to have it on for that many hours a day. Now that she uses the Neubie, she tells us, in an hour or 2 a day, she could have had the same effect as what took her 12 hours that day. But she did all this work, and she's very inspirational, and has now a large audience of many thousands of MS patients. And so we started working together because, several years ago, this was still in the anecdotal realm. We were seeing MS patients who could regain sensation, regain function, some of whom got out of wheelchairs and regained their autonomy. Some got their driver's license back, were able to go back to work, were able to give up the need for a full-time caregiver at home. And so we started seeing all these, and then started working with a physical therapist who's part of the Centura group, big healthcare system in Colorado. And we were talking with her, and she is, very motivated in advancing the profession. Wonderful spirit and heart. And she wanted to do this as a sort of a pilot, do a case series. And so she worked with and documented 7 patients over the course of, it was 3 sessions a week for, I believe, 6 weeks, home in a home health setting. She had 7 patients, 2 non-ambulatory, the rest were ambulatory. She looked at the EDSS disability score. I forget the exact acronym. She looked at spasticity and strength with manual muscle testing. She had a neurologist who was a co-investigator in the study, who did initial evaluation and testing with all the patients and everything, and saw, really objectively, really positive changes in terms of reductions in spasticity, increases in muscle strength and activation, sometimes going from, on that, on a 5-point scale, going from no contraction at all to having some contraction, or increasing, 1 or 2 numbers during that period of time. And overall, it did show these objective data. And then subjectively, for her, it was kind of cool. Several patients told her how much better they were feeling. There was one that she talked about who was also battling some depression, who felt like he wasn't making progress. And in looking at the objective data, he saw that he was making progress, and that helped things click to where it kind of changed his mindset as well. So it was just a really, really wonderful to see. Again, I'm happy to share the link for that study. It was published in just probably 2 months ago from the time we're sitting here having this conversation. And it is, all the scientific caveats here. It's a case series, so the statistical power is low, but we're seeing at the very least that there's something here that's worth further study, right? And that it's worth exploring. Yeah. And in the meantime, we have, at our clinic here in Austin, we have our one teaching facility. It's kind of a showroom and an observation opportunity and a teaching facility here. And then at many others around the country, because of Dr. Walls, literally because of our partnership with her, more MS patients are learning about this, and they're seeking out. They're going to our website, looking at our network of NeuFit certified providers, and seeking out these physical therapy clinics that have the Neubie. And so we hear from clinics all over the country how these same transformational stories where people are making progress, getting their quality of life back, and it's just really wonderful. So it's nice to have some of the data, but it also, we don't necessarily have to wait for the next study either.
Yeah, that's right. I was saying that to you off the air. I had an experience with one of my practice owners in Tacoma, and I was out there working on assisting him to open up his second and now third office. And he has a Neubie in each location, but at the time he had one office. And what struck me was when I was out there, I was asking about how's it going? How's it working for you? And I was surprised when he said, to be honest with you, Brian, I got a 3-week waiting list for people who want to use it. I said, oh, you got a lot of athletes in the area? He says, no, it's MS patients. He says, I treat the athletes. I do my Medicare patients. No, but by all means, it's applicable to all diagnoses and all age groups and demographics. He says, but the outcomes we're getting with our MS patients are just amazing. And because it being such a tight-knit community, there's the MS Society and the MS, local groups and chapters. And he had people driving from an hour away. And as I said to you off the air, nobody needs to read a study. Nobody needs to see statistics. If a patient is driving who has a chronic illness like MS, who's been living with it every day of their life, they're not going to drive an hour away to get treatment for something that they know themselves they're not, that they're what they're feeling or what they're not feeling, right? They don't need it from a pages of a magazine. They need to know when they get out of bed, how was my day today? Or when they go to bed, how did I perform today? And he said it's just heartwarming to know that he's had an impact, a positive impact on the ADLs, the activities of daily living of these MS patients. So it's really great that you chose that as the first discussion here, because that has, of all of my travels, that has always stuck in the forefront of my mind. And it always makes me feel good about being an advocate and a proponent of the Neubie, because helping one person's life like that is worth it, right? I know you've been hard at work, working and collaborating with other big players in the PT community, other people in the medical community and research community. Share with us some more of that objective data. I know some is going to be coming out very soon, some is out now. I think people really need to hear that it's not just an isolated incident.
Yeah, so there's a few different lines of research that we have going clinically, and then also some pilot data from data from pilots that show the impact on the business front as well. So happy to share all.
Yeah, let's touch on that last.
Yeah, on the clinical side, a different category of benefits. One of the ways that we like to use the Neubie is to reduce atrophy or promote hypertrophy, and that can be post-op. That can be in cases where resistance training is either too risky because of the possibilities of injury or re-injury, or it's not accessible because of equipment, or because maybe it's an elderly person who doesn't have the mobility to get into certain positions, or for whatever reason. So one of these lines of inquiry, we a couple of years ago had a first study published looking at using the Neubie on one arm with no external load at all, compared to traditional resistance exercise. So call it 75% 1 rep max, bicep curls on the other arm. And we saw, and this was one of the first published studies on the Neubie a few years ago, saw that the acute response was very similar, essentially the same. And one of the things that they looked at was fluid movement on ultrasound. So when people lift weights and work out, we get this phenomenon of the pump, right, where muscles kind of swell and remain enlarged for a day or two. And there's actually a physiological mechanism for that, wherein the muscle cells, when they are fatigued during resistance training, they basically suck in the blood plasma. They suck in fluid. That plasma, of course, has proteins and other compounds in it that muscles want to use to repair and rebuild. And so we saw that fluid movement was very similar between the Neubie with no external load and traditional resistance exercise. And that's great because it hints at the possibility that the Neubie can have a similar effect. And then the follow-up study, which has just been accepted for publication and will be released any day, whenever the next issue of the journal comes out, is the next study that answers that next question of, okay, well, what's the effect over a full training cycle? How does this actually, where the rubber meets the road in real life, what types of results are we getting? So this next study looked at a full training cycle. So 6-week training cycle, 6 or 8 week training cycle. And this was looking at quad muscle growth, doing knee extension exercises, using the Neubie with no external load versus, again, traditional resistance exercise in that 75% 1 rep max range. And over the course of the study, the highlight is that they found similar growth using the Neubie with no external load compared to traditional resistance exercise. And so that was great. That was what we wanted to see. And then one other kind of interesting finding, which seems to make sense, is that the growth was in a certain radius around where the pads were placed. So for instance, here, they were looking at stimulating the vastus medialis and lateralis muscles down in the more distal quads. So they weren't stimulating the rec fem, for example, rectus femoris, and the growth was on the muscles that were stimulated, the vastus medialis and lateralis, not on the rec fem. And that shows that there is a more localized effect, which kind of makes sense. And that helps us understand that, sometimes, a little different population, but sometimes we'll have bodybuilders or, people who are working on their physique who will come in because they want to stimulate lagging body parts. So this shows that there is some specificity to the pad placement and possibly an opportunity to do that. And this overall, though, just shows that we can make the benefits of resistance exercise, virtually all of the benefits in terms of muscle building and how important it is to maintain muscle mass for healthy aging, because of the metabolic and the hormonal, the positive effects of that. The only thing that one might be missing, just in terms of talking about all the ramifications here, only thing that one might be missing, of course, is the effect on bone density. We didn't study that in this, so we don't know. We likely think that some resistance training is also still necessary for stimulating bone growth and maintaining bone density, but virtually everything else in terms of muscle growth and all these other effects, we see we're able to duplicate here. So it's, very exciting. It opens up some cool avenues for using the Neubie, and clinically.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to jump in and say clinically, taking it out of the healthy workout, work fit kind of, the population, go into the rehab population. Oftentimes early on, they can't have a resisted exercise. They can't have a load per se, but they can definitely go through that range of motion. And to do that with the Neubie, working at the same time is in giving them the same benefit as if they were working resistive. I mean, essentially statistically insignificant. Awesome. I mean, that's like a miracle. I mean, the fact that you can do that with certain people. I know, I had a disc replacement surgery and I needed that bone to graft and grab onto that titanium plate and do that. But the multifidus was shot, the medius was shot, I had the small, interspinal muscles are just off, and I'm 2 years out and I still feel my right hip extension is weak. And I'm listening to you thinking, oh, I should be newbieing that when I'm working that area. My question to you is a little more technical, a little bit. What pad placement, when you said pad placement, are we saying that it's the positive electrode that's on the muscle when the research, is that what you're seeing, and the negative electrode is opposite? But get a little bit more technical on that, if you will, because I just think a lot of us who are nerdy therapists, we kind of want to know that.
Yeah. So there's going to be, well, the Neubie is direct current. So the
Right.
positive and negative matter, right? That's obviously why you're asking the question. I just want to call that out.
It is.
And then there's two main categories of effect that polarity can have. One is the gradient of the electric field, the direction of the electric field, and how that might influence cell migration, which can influence the healing process and perhaps tissue regeneration and different things that we're learning about. Is a very exciting frontier. This is going back to the work of, if anyone wants a book recommendation, the work of Dr. Robert Becker and The Body Electric, which is a book that he worked in the 70s and 80s. I believe it came out in the late 80s or early 90s, something like that. But one of my favorite books. So there's that category of benefits, category of effects where the polarity can matter. But we'll set that aside for now, because to answer your question, we're talking more about the functional stimulation of muscle here. So for this study, we're using a slightly different setting. When we do our mapping and some of the things for which we're probably even better known, we're sending a lot more sensory and afferent signal and bypassing a lot of the contraction, especially protective co-contraction, so we can identify where the nervous system is guarding, protecting, and then send signals to accelerate that process of re-education. Gotcha. In this study, and when we're talking about hypertrophy, we're using different settings, so for different frequencies, where we're actually going to get more efferent motor output, and we're going to get more motor unit recruitment, activate more muscle fibers in a similar way as we're seeing here, similar way to having external load on the body, even if you don't, like as if you were lifting weights. And so here, the positive and negative, there's going to be stimulation, there's going to be an effect on both. The biggest difference is essentially the ratio. There's going to be a little bit more stimulation at the negative electrode, because the nervous system conducts more with positive ions, like sodium and potassium, right, are both positively charged. So it's not so much that it's more of a quantitative difference rather than a qualitative one. It's more about, it's going to be a little bit more at the negative electrode and a little bit less at the other, but there's going to be a similar effect at both. It's like, it's like 55-45. So there's actually going to be a similar training effect on both. And for this more recent study, looking at quadriceps muscle hypertrophy, they had pads on both the VMO and the VL. So they had, both were getting a similar type of stimulus. Perhaps, one is a little more than the other, depending on where the negative is, but qualitatively, it's the same type of stimulus and same type of effect on both of those muscles.
And that's the positive electrodes on both of those muscles.
One had the positive and one had the negative in order to close the circuit. So
okay.
Red, and I'd have to look to see. I believe it was black on the medialis and red on the lateralis, but I'd have to look and just
No, I'm just curious because I want people to understand how much it matters. This isn't like tens, right? And I know I'm watering it down a little bit, but this is such advanced technology because it's why it gets the outcomes that you're talking about. So that's fantastic on the atrophy side. And I'm thinking even 2 years post-op, I could benefit and continue to benefit from such a treatment. So it's good. I love having you on the podcast because I learn a little something about myself every time. So for those of you in practice and you have that young clinician, you have that 8-year out clinician who's just looking to continue to up their game, continue to strive to practice at the top 10% of their license. This is the kind of thing you need to put in front of them. This is the kind of thing that your practice actually needs to show your community that you're not status quo. You're not, the generic physical therapy shake and bake practice. Not that any of my listeners are, but you're not. You can't even remotely be viewed as such because you are bringing such an advanced, application into your practice clinically. Garrett, what was the other thing that is going on that's coming out recently that you recently have been doing and working on that people need to know about?
So we have just completed a study on neuropathy, and this is with the hands-on diagnostics group.
Yes.
And this is interesting because I didn't even realize how staggering the statistics are, but it's in the US alone, tens of millions of people with neuropathy. And the symptoms of that, well, it's mostly diabetic neuropathy, chemotherapy induced, but it can be idiopathic or due to other causes. And it leads to symptoms like pain, weakness, deficits in sensation, significant increases in fall risk, and you're really strongly impaired quality of life. So it's a bigger deal than I realized before really starting to look into it in preparation for this study. And in this study, we looked at diabetic neuropathy patients with an average age of 74. So these are patients for whom it's been written off that they can ever heal or regenerate tissue in any meaningful way. And the solutions essentially are drugs to manage symptoms and traditional physical therapy, not necessarily to improve, but just to more like palliative care, like try to manage the situation. And no one really has the expectations that people are going to make significant improvements. And those expectations hold true for traditional, electrical modalities. People have tried them with neuropathy patients, haven't had much luck, much success. And so with that background, this study I think is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is it's looking at that population, and two, we're actually pairing head-to-head traditional alternating current like TENS, traditional electrical stimulation with the direct current of the Neubie, seeing those head-to-head, because the control group was getting the same treatment. We did a foot bath treatment. One of the electrodes immersed in water with a foot. Other electrode is up on the lower back. So we have the current traveling the entire length of that peripheral nerve. And for the control group that did the alternating current treatment with a typical TENS unit, they saw, virtually no progress, nothing statistically significant, nothing meaningful. Contrast that with the group that got Neubie treatments, and we just got to hear this data. We were at the annual symposium for this hands-on diagnostics group that trains PTs in how to do musculoskeletal ultrasound and also electrodiagnostics, so EMG and nerve conduction velocity tests. And so we just got to hear this data. It's being written up and prepared for submission to peer review right now. But we got to hear the data, which I can't share the numbers, but I can at least summarize. And so for the group that received treatments with the Neubie, they saw statistically significant increases in nerve conduction velocity, which actually objectively shows changes in myelin in their nerves. We saw increases in nerve signal amplitude, which shows improvement in the quality of axon tissue. So perhaps collateral sprouting or actual meaningful healing and regeneration in axons. They also saw that correlated strongly with subjective functional improvements too. So really, really wonderful. This was 2 treatments a week for 6 weeks, so only 12 treatments, not a very long period of time. And to have the results that we did was, I think very remarkable. To my knowledge, well, a little bit of background. So some of these benefits of direct current that we talk about actually have been known for many years. The Soviets did work with direct current back in the 1960s, 1970s, but there was always this problem where when you turn up direct current to these therapeutic levels, it would sting and burn the skin. And so, it was essentially thrown out for decades because, case of the baby being thrown out with the bathwater, I would say. And then in its place came all these, TENS, interferential, NMES, FES, right? All these different electrical modalities. And so direct current, the work that at least that we've seen shows these benefits on, with these direct current electric field gradients and how they promote healing and regeneration, shows these possible benefits in animal models. And to my knowledge, at least, this is one of the first, if not the first, that starts to show some of these regenerative capabilities of direct current in humans. So it's really exciting because the effect on nerves in this population, of course, is very meaningful, and it also starts to show us some of the true power of direct current and opens up a lot of exciting avenues for clinical application here and further research.
As a practice owner, we've gone to school 5, 6, sometimes longer years and studying, and then you get out and you just want to do the best by your patient, right? And so I'm asking you guys listening, all of you in the audience listening, I can't be the only, you probably shared the same experience I have when you have that 65, 75, 85-year-old patient who's just sweet as can be, lived their whole life, and you just want to do the best thing you can for them. And then you're told well, that's just the way it is. That's just what they're going to have. And give the palliative treatment, put them on medication, or, just give them a series of this or that. And you're like, gosh, there's nothing else that can be done. Really? We can't help improve this person's gait at all. Like, we can't take a little bit of that foot pain away, or, man, I've had that so many times and my heart's gone out to my patients. Like, there's nothing more I can do. It's great to hear that there is something new under the sun. There is something that has objective data, full results, numerical values that actually show before and after effects. I think that alone ethically has to force all of us listening as therapists to be willing to look, at least be willing to look, go to the website, get in touch with Garrett, get in touch with Jason Waz at NeuFit, learn about what this could do for your patients. Not, I want to talk about your practice too. And I want to talk about the viability and thrivability because we're suffering this income squeeze. We've got a minute for that coming up. But right now, forget about that. What are you willing to do for your patients? Are you willing to set aside the time to read this report, read these journals, contact NeuFit, let them summarize it for you like you have with Garrett? I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously one of the top 10%. That's what the podcast is titled, because you want to do what's best for your patients and the people in your community. And so here you are listening to us. So I'm asking you to just go back to your core values, go back to your morals and your ethics of why you became a therapist, and then take the extra effort, go and get the extra credit to learn about something that currently exists that you can put in your practice and have an effect on a 70-year-old's life. 75. We're all going to get there, folks. I mean, I'm 55. It's going to happen. I want someone to think about me like that. I don't want someone to think about me like a CPT code. So that's what I'm asking you. That's what this week's podcast is about, is for you to really get in touch with your heart and know that if there is something out there that you can do and have an influence in someone's life, which Garrett is showing the data he's put. I mean, he doesn't get paid to do these researches. He doesn't get paid all the hours to set aside all this stuff. This stuff takes days, weeks, months. He's doing it for you. Now, I think I'm asking you to do it for your patients. I'm asking you to do it for your community, and just be willing to look. If that's helpful and influential to you, then that means a lot to me. That means the world. I'm also asking you to look around at your family and your coworkers and the people that you sign a paycheck for, because as I talked about, this income squeeze is happening. Average reimbursements are going down. Medicare is proposing another cut. I don't know if you all heard, but Aetna's looking to follow Medicare and cut next year as well. Are they out of their flipping mind? I mean, you got to be listening to me or watching this and be like, Brian, are they sober? I mean, are they deluded? I mean, what is going on in their DNA and their genetic thinking? Inflation has gone up 17% since January 2021. We're coming out of a pandemic crisis. Eggs are $8 a dozen. Thank God I got 15 chickens. This is what's happening around there. And yet they're going to cut reimbursement. Who do you think that's going to affect? It's going to affect the same people that we're supposed to be caring for. I mean, if you guys are irate about that, then you have to start looking at the progressive PT practice model. Outsource billing, outsource for your front desk, get the virtual front desk. You're going to have better people and bring in advanced clinical technology. If you're willing to do those things, you're going to have DPTs, PTAs, and techs in your practice, and you're going to surround yourself with advanced technology, getting better outcomes quicker, more efficiently, with higher quality care being delivered. And you will be the one standing. In 1997, I lived through the cuts of 1997, the Clinton effect. 3,500 home health agencies went out of business from 97 to the year 2000. Who did that help? You know what? It helped the ones that were still standing, because the ones that were still standing figured out a way to economize and create greater levels of efficiency and productivity and do more with less. And so they got the lion's share of the market. Unfortunately, it became a little bit more of a mill because it's all about the numbers, because they're practicing on the, fee for service business model. But I'm telling you, you don't have to be that kind of practice. You can bring in a brand new model, leave that business fee for service model, bring in a progressive model where you're outsourcing and paying for only the services you need. But if you don't have that clinical component, that advanced technology, you are leaving a big chunk aside. If you're not doing a pay for performance model and you're doing the 1960s model of still paying salary and benefits, well, good luck to you, because that's going to get uglier, not better. So clinically speaking, we've covered that. Practice management speaking, Garrett, I mean, they can hear this from me, because obviously this is what I do every day, is help to improve the bottom line and the efficiency and the work-life balance and job satisfaction of people in private practice. But you have some data. Share your data. They hear it from me all the time. Share your data on the clinical side. I know a group allowed you, a group that's very over the top on their statistical analysis and their practice management. I know the group you're talking about. And it's great that they're willing to let you share this. So for you guys that have 1 or 2 offices, or whether you have 52 offices, listen to this, because this is not only going to be such a game changer for your patients, this is going to be a game changer for your practice.
Yes, it's a good segue there, because obviously, we want to do right by our patients, everyone listening to this, and I applaud that. And then as you evolve your identity, like we talked about, and you become a CEO, you also have to look at the numbers, and it has to make sense. And so we've seen anecdotally this help, adding the Neubie help the bottom line of clinics. But this was particularly exciting just because of the type of data and the group it was with. So the group, I'm grateful they've given me permission to mention their name. It's CORT, Kentucky Orthopedic Rehab Team. So they have 70 something locations in Kentucky, and they did a pilot getting the Neubie at a handful of facilities. I went up there and did a training with 10 of their physical therapists across 5 facilities. And they do, as you said, they track data, very sophisticated, which was awesome. And I applaud them for looking at it and for trying to scale good care, the way that they're doing a lot of great things. They're doing very well. And we saw that with adding the Neubie, they were able to make things even better. So their 1, 2, 3 rate, so the number of patients that drop out within the first 3 visits for whatever reason, they don't think it's worth the copay, they don't think it's going to help them, it's more difficult to get there, whatever it might be. That rate was between 16 and 17%, and that when they used the Neubie, it dropped almost in half, between 8 and 9%. So think about the retention. Think about in your practice, if you can cut your dropout rate in half, you're able to retain those patients for longer. You're able to serve them at a higher level, certainly able to help with revenue and volume and the overall, to quote Brian, the abundance of care being delivered, right? You're able to demonstrate value for people, so they're motivated to stay with you. And they also saw increases in their arrival rate. So their arrival rate was between 83 and 84%, went up to 89% when they used the Neubie. And their net promoter score, which is, everyone, if you're not familiar with the concept, you've probably seen you're a customer of someone and the business sends you a survey. How likely are you on a scale of 1 to 10 to refer a friend or family member? And so it's essentially a calculation based on the answer to that. So they were doing really well. They were already in the high 80s, 88 to 89 net promoter score. And for reference, some of the most loved companies like Tesla, whether you love them or hate them, but customers are fanatical about that, and they're in the high 70s, low 80s, and for their customers who are fanatical about the company. So just for reference, so they're already doing really well. And then when they added the Neubie, that went up to a 98. It got even better. So now, yes, we're talking about these clinical benefits and how it helps with patient outcomes, but we're seeing that can actually translate into more patients coming in, patients staying for longer. Some of them are now also, they share with us, some of them are converting when their plan of care is done. Some of them are staying and doing cash services for fitness or wellness. Of course, when it's compliant, right? It's not just PT by a different name, but it's actually when their plan of care is complete. People are staying on it. Right. So there's all these different avenues where it's actually making an impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Anything you can do today, this is part of the being a progressive owner, right? When you take one patient and make them two, you can take one patient and make them three, right? And what do I mean? You bring that patient in, you treat them, you execute their plan of care. They have this injury, they have this morbidity level, and then you bring them back to their pre-morbid state of being. You bring them back to their existing where they were prior to injury, and then you put them in an aftercare program that can accelerate them to a higher level of operations, a higher level of optimum health. And when they're in a higher level of optimum health, then they're going to want to maintain that high level of optimum health, because the risk of return injury, the risk of repeat injury, it drops off greatly. And when you have a net promoter score that high, that's stratospheric. I mean, those are stratospheric numbers. So a group like that Kentucky group, because I've known about them for years, look, guys, you may not have the time, energy, and resources to have that degree of detail, that degree of microscopic oversight and view of your data and your statistics. So let the groups that have the resources do it for you. This group has already done the work. They've already proved the validity of how this product can help the bottom line of your practice. And when I talk about your practice model, I want to make sure that you're implementing every single strategy possible so that you don't have to resort to, in order for us to, remain competitive and remain profitable, we have to see more patients, more units, more patients, more units. If you're still in that game of more patients, more units, you're in the dwindling side of an era, because there's not going to be enough patients and enough units that you're going to be able to stay on top of. That's going to make this practice survive. I'm just being honest with you. That's not your answer to survival, because your staff's going to get bent out of shape. They're going to get burnt out. They're going to feel like they don't have the work-life balance they deserve. And, I'm just going to give two simple examples to this. And this is where the Neubie really fits in so nicely, is when you can bring in an aftercare program so you can take some of that load off of your clinicians and you get that cash-based service off of your existing case, your existing patient load. I mean, it's not like you have to go out there and spend more marketing dollars to bring somebody in from the outside. These people are right here in front of you. I had a practice owner who I spoke to who's in a part of the country where their average reimbursement's 120 a visit. 120 a visit is their average reimbursement. And this owner is the lowest paid person on their payroll. They have 17 therapists. So let that sink in for a minute. Here's a practice. A lot of you guys in New York are like, we're surviving on $73 a visit. I know you are. This practice is surviving on like 127 or 125, something like that. It was like 127, I thought it was. And this owner is the lowest paid person in their practice. And I'm like, okay, you definitely have to change something. You have to confront the reality of what's going on and make some serious practice management changes. And it goes back to Garrett's comment. I actually wrote it down here. You have to have an identity transformation. I told this owner, you got to stop saying yes to everything. You got to stop thinking like, if I just am nice to everybody and give everybody what they want, they're all going to just row in sync and as hard as I'm going to row for success. It's not going to happen. So you have to put a clinical tool in, an advanced technological tool that gets the outcomes you're looking for. That is going to what Garrett was just talking about with this group. It's branding, right? It's branding. They're going to be known as that group that has that special piece of machinery that gets outcomes that the other groups in town are not getting. Isn't that what you want? If you're listening to us right now, isn't that what you want? Isn't that the brand you want, where your referral sources are like, I don't know what they're doing over there, but I need to learn what they're doing because my patients are coming in here raving about this experience that nobody else is doing. So that brings me back to our beginning of the podcast. You have to put in changes now. Make the changes now. Reach out to us. We're going to put the links below to some of these studies so you can read them that Garrett's willing to share. We're going to put all Garrett's information so you can connect to NeuFit directly. Connect to Meg, get a practice assessment with us. We're not going to try and sell you anything. We're going to talk about your state of the union, where you are, and how we can move you forward. We're obviously going to talk about these clinical key elements that are going to change your game inside your practice for sure. But we're also going to talk about you. We're going to talk about how you need to transform, how you need to change from being an employer, a clinician, and stop going to work saying I'm a physical therapist who happens to own a practice, but go to work saying I'm an owner who happens to be a therapist. And that's what this is all about, making that switch. So Garrett, you've touched on the clinical outcomes. You've touched on the practice management outcomes. You've touched on the science and how this is DC current, not AC current, how this is nothing like TENS. This TENS is statistically insignificant in the research data that you've presented. What's the future hold here? Where are we going from here? Because I know the re-sign rate for people who get one machine that gets another is just in the 90s nationwide. It's got to be, because the people that I have, it's like 98%. So it's got to be. Talk a little bit about that. Let's end on that. Let's tell people that, there is something you can do about it. If you want to have a better life and a better practice and be a better owner and have better work-life balance for you and your staff, this is a key element to it. What can you say about moving forward from here that supports that idea?
Well, in terms of moving forward for the people we're already working with, that already have a Neubie or multiple Neubies in their practice, for us, a large part of the emphasis now is translating findings from research into clinical education. So we have several and are working on more continuing education courses that are good for CEU credit towards license renewal. And we have modules on everything from neurological patients. So we have an overview on how to treat neurological patients generally, and then a specific module on MS and neuropathy, the two that we've discussed so far here today. We have a course on muscle hypertrophy, again, translating some of this research into clinical practice, a course on biomechanics and athletic development, which of course I think we're all athletes, so it's actually relevant to far more people, but certainly relevant for athletes that may be in your practice as well for rehab or ongoing performance development. We have that's perfect. I don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to stop right there and just say that's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. You guys know I don't script my podcast. These are live engagements. These are live conversations. Garrett's like, well, I don't know what exactly you're saying. No, he knew exactly what I was saying. He went right into the educational area. Let me ask you guys listening, how many of you have bought a piece of equipment and had a course that went along with the application and utilization of that equipment? I know I never did. I mean, if I bought an Epi or I bought an Ionto or whatever, I was given the instruction sheets. I mean, there's a course on how you can best help your diabetic neuropathy patient. There's a course on how you can best help your MS, how you can best help your atrophy patients, your post surgical patients, patients like me with spinal surgery and post-op neuropathy. They're supporting you clinically. They're not just selling you a device and saying, good luck with that. They're supporting you not just clinically in the application of it. They have ongoing training so that you can perfect the skill of being a Neubie clinician. I've got to have you ask yourself, and just thinking silence here to yourself,
Where else have you ever experienced that? I've never experienced that in any clinical application or device that I've ever purchased. That degree of, we will work side by side with you to ensure that you perfect the application of this device with your patients. I think that's super outstanding. Garrett, if I'm not mistaken, one last thing I wanted to touch on. I'm sorry I cut you off on that, but I did want to get to this. I believe you guys also are helping support people in the marketing, branding, and awareness of the fact that they have a Neubie in their clinic. Like, how do they become a disruptor in their community? How do they become a clinical differentiator in their community? If I'm not mistaken, you guys have even gone to that length that you help with that.
There are ways that we help practice owners with that. A couple of them are, I've been fortunate to be invited onto podcasts just like this here, but with people who have more broad patient audiences. Like we talked about, content with Dr. Walls and how that led to thousands of MS patients going to our website and looking at our directory and looking up NeuFit providers in their area. I've been able to go on podcasts with other people like Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield, who have a lot of, hundreds of thousands of people listening who are seeking out NeuFit providers. So, people, once they get the device and complete our certification, get that listing on our website. We also provide marketing materials that practice owners can use in marketing their own practice. Different, whether it be copy and images and videos for the website, around the product, or even athletes using it. Like we have videos of Saquon Barkley and Mike Tyson using it that practice, and John Isner, the pro tennis player, and Major League Baseball pitchers and NHL players, that people can use in marketing their own business, and things where, PDFs that practice owners can put their own logos on and things like that. And then we're active on social media, and so we're able to just get the word out in all these different ways, and try to attract more people to see NeuFit providers all over the country.
That's right. That's what I was getting at, because I have a folder on my computer with the Neubie, and I have all those marketing materials. I have all those flyers, those articles, those pictures. I don't have the advanced videos that you have, but I knew that they existed, and so I wanted people to know that not only are you going to get the training, not only are you going to get the advanced medical device itself, in its application, not only do you have the support of courses to further enhance the skills of the application within your staff and throughout your entire rank and file, you're also going to get the marketing support of how to actually communicate it, how to share it, how to educate your patient public, as well as your surrounding referral sources, your medical resources in your community. That all exists through video, through print materials. You have it all. It's a truly, it's an industry disruptor, and you have all the support from NeuFit to apply that to whatever level you're willing to put forth. And I've seen that with my clients, and they've done so well. I see that in my Slack channels. I have a whole Slack channel with well over 300, I think 2,000 therapists on our Slack channels, and it's PTs helping PTs, and they're all sharing ideas of, how did I communicate this? I did a symposium on this. I did a lecture on that. I did a Zoom cast on this, and they're showing like what they did and how that worked. So the buzz is out. It's feverish. People are loving talking about it. They're loving sharing their experiences. They love sharing their success stories, and you have a whole library of that stuff that you can share with new people coming in. So I highly encourage all of you guys to at least go back, be willing to look, be willing to ask, go to the website. I'm going to have Garrett give you that website information. He'll give you a phone number that you can call as well. So it's here on this channel. And of course, we're going to publish it down below. So that's it for this week. Garrett, how can people best get a hold of you guys by phone and by web? And any other parting words, and we'll let people go.
The best way to reach us, one is through our website, www.neu.fit, NEU, like neurological, neu.fit. And then there's a special landing page, neu.fit/meg, that people specifically in your community can go to. And I don't know that people call us on the phone, but they can, 512-246-0337.
Good, good. Most
And
people don't, but some people want to have a dialogue. They'll just reach out by web, I'm sure.
I'm glad I remember the phone number. When you said that, I was like, oh shoot, what is our what is our phone number?
Oh, I wouldn't have known our number either. I shouldn't have said that. Is there an email you'd like to put out?
Email, yeah. You can email sales@new.fit. So it says sales, but our sales team, is actually mostly clinicians, and they're the same people that do support. Very educational. We're not going to hard sell anyone anything. But
yeah, great.
You can reach out there. And then parting words, gosh, I think the idea
We've covered a lot.
The idea of changing our identity as we evolve, I like that. I think business really is an avenue for personal development and, dare I say, even spiritual growth, and the journey that we're all on here together. I think it's a wonderful journey. I applaud everyone for the work that they're doing, and I'm excited to talk with more practices in the MEG community, because the ones that we've worked with so far are the ones who do see their journey as one of personal development, are willing to put in the effort and improve themselves, and by extension improve all those around them, their staff, their patients, just make a big impact. So it's a wonderful community you've built. We're excited to be able to collaborate with you. Thank you, Brian, and thanks everyone for tuning in here.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. I know there's a lot of things you could be doing, but you chose to be here with us. If you're going to make a difference, it's going to start with you. It's only when you're beating your hands on the table and you're demanding a change are you actually going to experience that change. So my parting words are: PTs helping PTs. Be willing to look and be willing to make the changes necessary to live the life that you've always envisioned for yourself. So I enjoy doing this every week. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Garrett, thank you so much for your time. I'm truly blessed and honored that you gave your time and have connected with us. I believe we've made some good changes and a big impact in the PT community. And it's all because of your research and all the time you've put into it. You've done the work. People are benefiting from it. So thank you for that. And God bless everybody. Get out there and do some good work and help everybody that you can. That's what this is all about. Till next week, start each and every day expecting to do well.